I have slides in here that I will not be going over because Dan's already gone over them for us. And so we kind of didn't coordinate as well. Hopefully in the future we'll coordinate a little better who's covering what. So I'm just going to go past them, but bear with me because we'll go through some of them. And these are some additional information I think you need to have. One thing I found actually after I put this together to put on the website, and I just wanted to point it out to you. Senate Enrolled Act 2 added that, and this has become very important recently, if someone is disregarding the stop arm and the flashing light of a school bus, they can be fined a safe school fee. That used to be just for handguns. Now when they're blowing past those school buses, they can get the safe school fee, which as citizens we're all happy about. The fee is set by the court. It can be between $200 to $1,000. Prior to this bill, SEA 2, this fee was sent 100% to the state. Starting in July, 75% will still be sent to the state, and 25% you will keep locally in your general fund. So it's going to offset some of your law enforcement costs for tracking these people down. Just so you're aware of it, it does split the fee now. Okay. The next one Dan just went over, so we're going to go over that, skip that one. Got all my skip notes in a separate section. Okay. Some of these I'm going to go over real quickly. I just want you to be aware of them. SEA 142 on building permits. If there is a conflict of interest on the issuance of permit, your county does need to address that. If you do not have a current ordinance that meets the requirements of this new chapter they established in 36.1, it's 36.127. They must adopt an ordinance to establish a procedure to address that conflict of interest that prevents a building commissioner or building official or inspector from issuing a permit. Okay? This is if they have a financial interest in the building, they should not be in the permitting process. So you have to have a process to do that. I don't know how prevalent that is, but evidently it happened at least once because we got a bill on it. Okay, 171 he did. Look how many we get to skip. Okay. I don't know how many counties this affects, but again, there has to be at least one. After June 30th, 2019, a unit may not enact an ordinance to require a solid waste hauler or a person who operates a vehicle in which recyclable materials transported for recycling to collect the fees authorized by this chapter and remit those fees to the district or to the county. So if you are having your haulers collect this fee, they can no longer do that. Okay, I'm not going to go over this in any detail, just so you know about it. This is going to affect your clerks and your election board. Just so you know, there are some new procedures for security, for making sure that our elections go through exactly the way they're supposed to go through. There are some audits that can be done. It's not something you're ever going to be involved in, except it could increase costs for your county if they have to go through these audits. So just be aware of that. Evidently, it is a concern in Indiana that not all people charged with a crime are getting the public defenders they're supposed to. The Public Defender Commission is working with legislature, and they got this bill passed to allow counties to go together to get their public defenders coverage. Okay, so this is in amends Indiana Code 3340-5-4 on the Public Defenders Commission. Allows them to adopt guidelines and standards for the requirements concerning the creation and operation of a multi-county public defender's office. That way you can share expenses. It will be created under an interlocal agreement. One county auditor among those counties is going to be assigned to be the fiscal officer for that interlocal agreement, and we'll be tracking those. Huh? Oh, okay. So one of the county auditors will be creating a fund for that interlocal agreement and recording and taking care of the transaction for the cost, the revenue coming in and the cost going out for that. There is additional language in that chapter on creating a county public defender boards, on getting reimbursement for these capital cases. So you want to look at that if you decide to go into this. But that is now an option that is available to you. And I talked to this with the recorders. Again, I'm not going through the whole bill, but there was a section in there. If there is a transfer on death deed that has been recorded, it has to be recorded before the death of the owner. Any subsequent conveyance is void. It is not recorded before the death of the owner. It's trying to correct some of that. Again, I do not know how many counties this affects, but you can no longer, or under home rule, you cannot limit beekeeping. Keep that in mind. If they want to keep bees, unless it's a public safety, you got to let them. Okay. This affects the cities and towns, but it has an indirect effect on you. It limits their extraterritorial powers. Before they were able to do a lot more outside their corporate limits, and now it is putting some limitation on that. So the unincorporated areas of the county that are under the county's control are regaining some control over that. So you need to be aware of that. Again, I listed some of the things it affects, like powers to regulate control or property use, exercise of eminent domain, what municipal airports can do if they're out in the county, of the area around them, affecting on water courses, planning and zoning, and parks as well. So just be aware that that is a change. We did that one. Okay. Senate Enrolled Act 582 defines a user fee, and this is different than what we call user fee, but there is a definition for this section of the statute. A user fee is a fee, rate, or charge imposed by a political subdivision that represents a just, reasonable, and proportionate approximation of the use or privilege for the use of a service, the benefit conferred by the use or privilege for use of a service, and the costs incurred by a political subdivision for providing the service or availability. Okay? Cannot be excessive in relation to the costs incurred for providing the services. Things like utility fees, stormwater fees, solid waste management fees, conservancy district fees, all of those, you can go on. What it also does is says an individual may not file an appeal under Indiana Code 6-1.1-15 for user fees, only for property taxes. So they cannot use the property tax appeal to appeal their sewage bill. Can go to the court if they want to. 1001 is the state budget bill, and obviously I'm not going over that, but there were some things in there I wanted to talk to you about. There was some additional information on innkeeper's tax that is kind of in that bill that you need to be aware of. One of it is a change on, again, this is more for the treasurers on that, but we talked a little bit last year about it, and they're looking into things. If you have a marketplace facilitator, so we're talking about people renting their personal homes out to strangers for a short period of time, on when they have to pay innkeeper's tax as well and when they don't. So this also redefines what a facilitator is. So you're looking like, your platforms, Airbnb, things like that. It also has some information also on peer-to-peer vehicle and how that's going to affect excise tax, again, just so that you know that they are looking at these kinds of arrangements and getting the appropriate taxes on that. The one thing one thing that's kind of been a hot topic that is addressed in 1001, it provides that a treasurer may enter into an agreement with the fiscal officer of an entity responsible for the expenditure of funds from the innkeeper's tax to furnish that fiscal officer each month with the name and retail address of each business collecting an innkeeper's tax and the amount collected from each business. Okay. House Enrolled Act 1018 is on park boards. It doesn't undo anything that's been done, but if you're establishing a new park board or you're reestablishing, there are procedures you need to follow. If you amend an ordinance that was established prior to December 31st, 2019, you also need to follow these procedures. It deals with who gets appointed to the park board. So now, under the new one, once you go with these new rules, the commissioner will appoint 2 members, the council appoint 2 members, and there will be another elected official, county official, that's established in the ordinance who will appoint 1 member. It's no longer the judge. House Enrolled Act 1019 on Public Works. This bill increases from $100,000 to a new threshold of $150,000, the ceiling under which a Board of Aviation Commissioners or an airport authority board may perform certain public construction projects with their own workforce. It used to be 100, it just bumped it up to 150. For your county drainage board, the bill increases the ceiling from $75,000 to $150,000, where the board may obtain quotes rather than advertise per bids. So that hopefully will help some of the smaller projects get done. Okay, we talked about that yesterday. We talked about that one. Okay, House Enrolled Act 1065 is the regional holding facility. And I don't know if your county's looking into that, but it does amend the statutes listed, allowing for the construction and maintenance of a regional jail and regional holding facilities. If your county requires a surety bond be posted as a condition of receiving a license or permit, this new statute under 3614 adds Chapter 22 for the conditions for that surety bond. One of those, which I informed of the county recorders at their conference, is the bond itself is considered sufficient if it's filed with the county. It does not have to be recorded. House Enrolled Act 1116. I have talked too much today. You guys have got to be tired of listening to me. The bill adds to reasons when an executive meeting can be held to include when a real property transaction, including a purchase, a lease as the leaseor or as the leasee, a transfer or exchange or sale up to the point of the contract or option is executed, can be held in an executive meeting.
Sorry about that. Okay, so I know different counties are doing it different ways, but I wondered what was your opinion on executive sessions of the council and the commissioners, what the auditor's role is, what you see the auditor's role is, and do we have to sit in there and listen to what they say to make sure they only discuss what is advertised?
We are not going to audit for that. I mean, that's going to be a county decision. It's just not an audit position we're going to take. We're not going to check to see if you were there or you weren't there. Mostly you're going to run into maybe citizen complaints if they don't think it's being processed properly. But I can't tell you, we can't say, State Board of Accounts says you will sit through, the auditor is the secretary for those meetings. They should be there. Obviously, if they're discussing something that, they can have a designee on that. So there's just not any hard and fast rules that are going to say, yes, you have to be there, no, you don't. You are the secretary, so default rule is that you would be there. Okay. Another change in House Enrolled 1116, which we get a lot of questions on. Currently, if the county receives an insurance settlement for damaged assets, damaged property, they intend to use that or plan to use that settlement to repair or replace that damaged property. That repair or purchase is going to take place within 12 months after the receipt of the insurance settlement. The auditor can appropriate that amount for that purpose. That's currently one time you guys get to do that. So you can add it to the appropriation to replace that asset. What this bill does is expand that authority. Instead of only insurance companies, if the settlement is received from anyone, any person, for damage to an asset, the auditor can appropriate those funds in compliance with the remaining requirements of the statute. All the rest stays the same, but say it comes from a citizen that has damaged it, or another political unit that has damaged it, and they're paying off what they owe you. Just because it didn't come from the insurance company, you can still appropriate that if you're going to use it to replace or repair the damaged property within 12 months of receiving that. So it expands that a little bit. These are not refunds. These are payments because of the damage to the property. Okay. And if you want to know what a person is, it is defined in the statute as a sole proprietorship, partnership, association, corporation, limited liability company, fiduciary, or individual. So it is pretty broad on person.
Lori, we have a question.
I wanted to address the executive session matter. The Indiana Code says that the county auditor shall attend all meetings of the county executive. And so it's not may, it says shall. And then in the memorandum of an executive session, you have to certify that nothing other than what was advertised was discussed in that meeting. If you don't attend, you can't certify that nothing else happened in that meeting. You don't have to put the details of an executive session because it's confidential by state
Right.
statute, but you do
Yes.
have to certify that nothing
But
else.
if you designate someone else,
You can-
we're not going to police that.
Right.
And that's kind of where I thought Kathy was going.
Right.
You know, if it's a situation where someone else is doing it before you, we are not going to audit to that level. So I can't really tell you, that's what the statute is. You are the secretary for that. You are the clerk for that board, so we expect you to be there. But I can't say that, we're going to come in and we're not going to write you up on this. So it really isn't something, we're not going to call your board up and say, you have to let them attend in a situation where they're making it difficult, as long as someone is performing that function, a designee. Okay. This bill also allows a board to receive electronic bids for solicitation for bids. If your solicitation indicates the procedure for transmitting electronic bids to the board can receive those on a fax machine or a system with a security feature that protects the content of the bid. The board can select a vendor, provide an electronic platform to accommodate electronic bidding. And it also amends Indiana Code 36-9-27, which we all know is our favorite drainage law, that the Drainage Board can send by mail or electronic mail written invitations for bids. Okay. House Enrolled Act 1125 on the CUMCAP Improvement Fund, CCI Fund. It just expands the purposes for that fund to include the purchase, lease, or pay all or part of the cost of electronic monitoring equipment used by your local community corrections program. House Bill 1192, which I hope will never affect any of you, does expand if there is a theft by a public servant and all other attempts have failed. There is the possibility of going to the pension funds. House Enrolled Act 1198. And that's the statute 36-1-8.5 is the statute on restricted addresses. So if a covered person wants to restrict address to that covered person's home address by means of public property database website, they must submit a written request to the unit that operates the public property database website. This was originally established for judges and law enforcement officers, victim of domestic violence, and the list goes on. It has now added that a family case manager, family case managers, their supervisors, the local office director, the regional manager, the child services assistant, or the attorney for the child protection program can also be considered a covered employee. This really doesn't affect you directly. I just want you, again, this is kind of like the election board audits. 1342, the telephone CPR training is a new requirement for your PSAP, your emergency dispatchers. This could increase costs because there should be training associated with this, so it could increase the cost for to get that training done. Okay. 1375, S. I love bills that have our name in it. Okay. The first thing this bill does amend, Indiana Code 5-11-1-9, which is regarding the audits of an entity, restricting the audit to the use of public money. An entity, when we're talking about this statute, is defined as any provider of goods, services, or other benefits that is maintained in whole or part at public expense or supported in whole or part by appropriations of public funds. So you're talking about your money going to your non-governmental units, like volunteer fire departments, economic development organizations, those kind of entities. We can audit them to the extent that they are receiving public funds. We don't audit the whole thing, just we can audit what happens with those public funds. Okay. It also added the whistleblower protection to an employee instead of not just an elected official, but if an employee reports nonfeasance, malfeasance, misfeasance, retaliation may not be taken against the person who makes the report. This one is important. It's going to hit your treasurers, but you need to be aware of it. It amends Indiana Code 6-1.1-37-10 on the application of payments on property taxes and when the penalties apply. Historically, the statute did not address the application of a payment that was not the full amount due. We had provided guidance in the past that each county would have to establish procedures for their county and apply those procedures consistently. Often, what happened was the payment was applied to penalties first, then to the delinquent taxes. Under the new statute, the payment is applied first to delinquent tax amount and then to any associated penalties. When you're determining applying penalties now, if the property taxes due and payable are not paid in full, and the property taxes due and payable are paid in full before the 30 days are up, and the taxpayer is not responsible for a previous tax payment on the same parcel or liable for a penalty from a previous tax payment, the penalty is 5%. After that, it goes to 10%. So the penalties are still there. They still have to pay them. If they have not paid them in full, then you go to the 10% penalty. But the payment is going to be applied to the property taxes first and not the penalties. Okay. This bill also amended Indiana Code 33-32-3-6. That's on your circuit court clerks. The auditor is no longer required to transmit a copy of the clerk's monthly financial report to us because they're uploading it on Gateway. Okay. Both this act and the 1427 that Dan went over amended 3625. This is on compensation. This now allows the council to establish a salary schedule that includes the compensation for a presiding officer that is greater than the compensation for other members. Your commission president, your council president can get a higher salary than the remaining of the board. as long as all applicable requirements in this chapter are satisfied with respect to the salary schedule that includes that the additional compensation is being provided because the individual has additional duties or attends additional meetings on behalf of the body as compared to the other members. The additional compensation applies only for periods during which the individual serves in that capacity as the presiding officer and handles those additional duties or attends those additional meetings. In 1375 that we're going over, it also goes on to define compensation to mean the total of all money paid to or on behalf of an elected county official for performing duties as an elected county official, regardless of the source of the funds from which the money is paid. This term includes all employee benefits. However, for the purpose of determining an increase or decrease in compensation during the term does not include the payment of insurance premium, payments in recognition of longevity, professional certification, educational advancements that are separately identified on the salary ordinance. So determining whether your salary is increased during the year for which it was set is not going to include those parts of your compensation. Compensation shall be established using an annual, monthly, or biweekly salary schedule. An elected officer is not required to report hours worked and may not be compensated based on the number of hours worked. Okay. This bill also amends or corrects for sheriffs. If your sheriff is being paid as a percentage of your prosecuting attorney and that salary increases in July, so will the sheriffs. That is not in violation of you can't change the salary during the year for which it's set of an elected officer. I'm not going. Yes.
Who's asking that?
I'm sorry? I can't hear you. Wait a second.
When the sheriff's compensation is changed in July, do we need to do an amended salary ordinance to accommodate that change?
No, if the salary ordinance says he's paid a percentage of the prosecuting attorney's salary and that salary goes up, then his pay is going to go up because he's still being paid that percentage of that salary.
Lori?
But what if it's stated as $1?